Stop wasting money on hair serums that only sit on the surface of a deeper issue. Hair thinning isn't just cosmetic. It's usually driven by a mix of genetics, hormones like DHT, and gradual changes in scalp health over time. After age 50, scalp circulation can slowly decrease, which may affect how efficiently follicles receive nutrients and signals. But in many cases, follicles don't just disappear overnight. They gradually shrink and become less active over time. And this is where real treatments matter. There is one clinically studied option used in dermatology that doesn't just support hair health. It can help slow down follicle miniaturization and, in some cases, improve visible density with consistent use over time. That's why it's important to separate marketing claims from what is actually supported by real research. A lot of the natural solutions circulating online aren't necessarily more effective than medical treatments. They're just easier to share and more popular to talk about. If you've started noticing more hair collecting than usual, that's not something to ignore. I know that feeling. Standing in front of the mirror each morning and slowly noticing more scalp than before. Catching yourself over the sink, counting hairs, trying to figure out when it started changing. It doesn't happen suddenly. And that's what makes it so frustrating. You try biotin, you change shampoos, but the results can be slow, inconsistent, or hard to notice at first. And that's because hair loss usually isn't just about external care. It's influenced by deeper biological factors that don't respond instantly. Right under your scalp, every hair comes from a small living structure called a follicle, and at its base sits the dermal papilla, which helps control how hair grows and cycles over time. But this system doesn't stay constant. With age, genetics, and hormonal activity like DHT, along with ongoing inflammation and reduced circulation, these follicles can slowly lose efficiency. The result isn't an immediate shutdown. It's a gradual shift where hairs grow finer, weaker, and shorter. And here's what makes it interesting. In many cases, the follicle doesn't fully disappear. It just becomes less active depending on the environment around it. Which leads to a real question. How many of those weakened follicles are still capable of being reactivated if the conditions improve?
In this video, I'm ranking 6 different approaches to hair loss, from basic DIY scalp methods all the way up to clinically used medical treatments in dermatology. We're going to break down what actually matters when it comes to hair thinning. Things like scalp inflammation, follicle miniaturization, and hormone-related factors like DHT that influence how hair gradually changes over time. By the end of this countdown, you'll have a realistic view of what can genuinely support healthier hair conditions, what's only weakly supported, and what's actually backed by clinical use and research. But be careful, because not everything popular online is harmless. Some of the most shared natural approaches can actually make scalp issues worse when they're used the wrong way or on the wrong scalp type. Let's start the ranking with one of the most common mistakes people make when trying to treat hair thinning at home. To really understand hair loss, you have to look at what's happening underneath the scalp surface. Each hair comes from a follicle, a small biological structure in the skin. At the base of it sits the dermal papilla, which helps regulate growth by interacting with blood supply and signaling when to produce new hair. But this system is not fixed. Over time, and especially with a mix of genetics and hormonal activity like DHT, along with ongoing inflammation and reduced circulation, these follicles can gradually become less efficient. Instead of producing strong, thick hair, they start generating finer and weaker strands. This process doesn't usually happen all at once. It's slow. Follicles tend to shrink and lose activity over time rather than shutting down instantly. And in many cases, they're still present, just operating at a much lower level. A key factor in pattern hair loss is DHT, a hormone that can shorten the growth phase in genetically sensitive follicles. At the same time, chronic inflammation around the scalp can further disturb normal hair cycling. This is also why many topical products fall short. They mainly affect the surface, how the scalp looks or feels, without meaningfully changing what's happening inside the follicle itself. Which brings us to the real question. What actually helps improve the conditions around the follicle, and what is just cosmetic support on the surface? Now that you understand what's happening at the level of the follicle, you might be tempted to go straight to your kitchen and try the first oil you see. But hold on, not all oils work the same way,
and some can actually make scalp issues worse depending on your skin type and how they're used.
In fact, some of the most popular natural remedies shared online are often oversimplified or not suited for everyone, especially when underlying factors like dandruff, inflammation, or hormonal hair loss are involved. Instead of relying on hype, this ranking is based on what we currently understand from research and dermatology, looking at things like how different substances interact with the scalp, their effect on inflammation, and whether they play any meaningful role in hair loss management. We'll start at the bottom, with the options that are mostly cosmetic or inconsistent, and work our way up to the approaches that are actually supported by stronger clinical evidence and commonly used in real treatment plans. Let's start with number 6, basic coconut oil and olive oil. You see these everywhere. Simple, natural, and heavily recommended in DIY hair care. And to be fair, they can help with hair softness and reduce protein loss in the hair shaft. But when it comes to actual hair regrowth, the evidence just isn't there. The problem isn't that these oils are bad, it's that they're often misunderstood. These are heavier oils, and for some people, especially with oily scalps, dandruff, or conditions like seborrheic dermatitis, they can sit on the scalp, trap buildup, and make irritation worse if overused. So instead of improving the environment for growth, they can sometimes create more imbalance, depending on how your scalp reacts. Think of it like this: you're conditioning the hair you already have, not directly influencing how new hair grows from the follicle. That's why in this ranking, they sit at the bottom. Useful for hair care, but very limited when it comes to treating hair loss. Score 3 out of 10. Good for conditioning, not for regrowth. Let's move to number 5, rosemary oil. This one is everywhere right now. You see it in DIY blends, scalp massages, even compared directly to medical treatments. And unlike most natural remedies, rosemary oil actually has some research behind it. A few studies have suggested that rosemary oil may help improve hair density over time, possibly by supporting circulation and reducing inflammation in the scalp. So yes, this is a step up from basic oils. But here's the reality. The results are still modest, and they take time. We're talking months of consistent use, not quick transformations. And just like any oil, it needs to be properly diluted. Used incorrectly, it can irritate the scalp instead of helping it.
Also, it doesn't directly target the main driver behind genetic hair loss, which is DHT. So while it may support a healthier scalp environment, it's not a standalone solution for most people dealing with pattern thinning. Think of it as a supportive tool, not a replacement for clinically proven treatments. That's why it sits here in the ranking. One of the better natural options, but still limited in what it can realistically do. Score 4.5 out of 10. Are you trying these popular oils and still not seeing real improvement? That's because hair loss isn't just about what you apply. It's about addressing the underlying factors like scalp condition and hormonal influence. As we move higher in this ranking, we're shifting away from basic maintenance and into approaches that start to have a more meaningful impact on the scalp environment. The next options represent a clear step up, not because they're miracles, but because they begin to address some of the common factors linked to hair thinning, like inflammation and overall scalp health. Let's move to number 4, scalp massage and microneedling. This is where we move away from just applying products and start actually interacting with the scalp itself. Because at the end of the day, hair growth isn't just about what you put on your head, it's about how the follicle is being stimulated. Scalp massage on its own may seem simple, but regular mechanical stimulation has been shown in some studies to slightly improve hair thickness over time, likely by increasing blood flow and influencing the hair cycle. But the real step up here is microneedling. Microneedling works by creating tiny, controlled micro-injuries in the skin. That might sound aggressive, but this process can trigger the release of growth factors and improve the way the scalp responds to treatments like minoxidil. In fact, studies have shown that microneedling combined with medical treatment can lead to better results than treatment alone. Now, this isn't risk-free. If done incorrectly, wrong needle size, poor hygiene, too frequent, you can irritate the scalp or even cause damage. So technique and moderation matter. Think of this as moving from passive care to active stimulation. You no longer just maintain the scalp, you're trying to signal it to respond.
That's why this ranks higher. Not a standalone cure, but a real step toward improving how the follicle behaves. Score 6.5 out of 10. Let's move to number 3, ketoconazole shampoo. This is where we step out of DIY territory and into treatments that are actually used in dermatology.
At first glance, it just looks like an anti-dandruff shampoo, but there's more going on here. Ketoconazole is an antifungal ingredient that helps control scalp conditions like dandruff and seborrheic dermatitis, both of which can create inflammation around the follicles. And when inflammation is present, it can interfere with normal hair growth cycles. But beyond that, some research suggests ketoconazole may also have a mild anti-androgen effect, meaning it could slightly reduce the impact of DHT at the scalp level. Now, let's be clear, this is not a standalone hair loss treatment. You're not going to regrow significant hair just by using a shampoo. But as part of a routine, especially if you have scalp irritation or flaking, it can make a real difference in improving the environment where hair grows. Think of it as clearing the ground before trying to regrow anything. You're reducing inflammation, keeping the scalp balanced, and setting better conditions for other treatments to work. That's why it ranks here. It's simple, accessible, and backed by medical use, but it works best as a support, not a solution on its own. Score 7 out of 10. But as helpful as these are, they're still mainly about improving scalp conditions and reducing irritation. The next 2 steps are different. They're not just about maintenance, but about directly influencing the hair growth cycle itself. We're now entering the most evidence-backed part of this list, where we move from supportive care into treatments that actually have measurable effects on hair growth in clinical studies. If the earlier approaches were about preparing the scalp, what comes next is about actively stimulating and regulating the follicle response. Let's look at number 2, minoxidil. Minoxidil is one of the most widely studied and clinically used treatments for pattern hair loss. While it doesn't work through a single miracle pathway, its main role is well understood. It helps prolong the hair growth phase, meaning follicles stay active for longer before cycling out. What makes minoxidil interesting is not hype, but consistency. Across multiple clinical studies, it has been shown to improve hair density in a significant number of users when used continuously over time. But there's an important detail most people miss. You don't get results instantly. Minoxidil is a long-term treatment.
In the early weeks, some users even experience increased shedding as weaker hairs are pushed out to make way for stronger growth cycles. That phase can feel discouraging, but it's part of how the process works for many people. It also doesn't target the root hormonal cause of hair loss, like DHT-related follicle sensitivity. Instead, it works more like a growth stimulant, helping follicles that are still active function better for longer. To use it properly, consistency matters more than anything. It's typically applied once or twice daily, directly to the thinning areas of the scalp, and results are evaluated over months, not days or weeks. The only reason this isn't number 1 is because it doesn't address every mechanism behind hair loss on its own. But in terms of real-world, repeatable clinical results, it remains one of the most effective standalone treatments available today. However, we are finally here. Number 1. This isn't a kitchen hack anymore, and it isn't just a supportive routine. This is the most clinically grounded, dermatologist-used approach on this entire list. Introducing number 1, finasteride. Now, before anything else, you need to understand what makes this different. Finasteride doesn't just support hair growth. It directly targets one of the main biological drivers of androgen-related hair loss, DHT production. Here's how it works. In the body, an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase converts testosterone into DHT. In genetically sensitive follicles, DHT can gradually shrink the hair growth cycle over time, leading to thinner and shorter hairs. Finasteride works by inhibiting this enzyme, which reduces DHT levels in the scalp and helps slow down follicle miniaturization. In many clinical studies, this has been shown to stabilize hair loss and, in a significant number of cases, improve density over time with consistent use. But this is not an instant solution. Finasteride works gradually, and results typically appear over months of continuous use, not weeks. And like all medical treatments, it comes with potential side effects that need to be discussed with a healthcare professional before starting. To use it properly, consistency matters more than anything. It's typically applied once or twice daily, directly to the thinning areas of the scalp, and results are evaluated over months, not days or weeks.
The reason this ranks number 1 is simple. It doesn't just support the environment of the scalp, it directly targets one of the core hormonal mechanisms involved in pattern hair loss.
This is not hype, not a trend, and not a DIY experiment. It's one of the most studied and widely used medical options we have today for managing hair loss at its source. But even the most effective treatment only works if it's used correctly, consistently, and with realistic expectations. If your hair is thinning, you can't afford to just sit and hope it fixes itself. Every month you wait, those follicles get weaker, and it gets harder to turn things around. That's exactly why I put together a simple page that shows you in plain language what people actually use when they're serious about slowing down hair loss. No fluff, no confusing science, just straight to the point. If you're ready to actually do something about it, click the link in the description.